This morning, I'm going to continue talking about the paramitas, which are the aspects of a bodhisattva, or the means by which we cross over from this shore to the other shore, from the shore of delusion or samsara or suffering to the shore of enlightenment. And last week I talked about dana paramita, the generosity or giving as a means to cross over. And today I'm going to talk about Sila, which means precepts. And sometimes it's translated as morality. So synonyms for moral are ethical, virtuous, righteous, noble, and I'll just, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, what these different words mean. Noble means to conform to a standard of what's good and right. So what standard do we use? If you recall, this morning we chanted in the identity and relative and absolute, don't judge by any standards. Okay. So when I was working as a software engineer, there were so many standards you could choose any one you wanted, you know. And as we'll show, there's when it comes to precepts, it's not just one rigid standard. And moral implies conforming to established, sanctioned codes or accepted notions of right and wrong. Okay. Now, established where is another thing we could ask. You know, I mean, things that are perfectly normal here in our country. You do something in Hong Kong, might get you in jail. You know, so. And then ethical may suggest the involvement of more difficult or subtle questions of rightness, fairness, or equity. And virtuous implies moral excellence and character. And righteous stresses guiltlessness or blamelessness and often suggests sanctimonious. And then noble implies moral eminence and freedom from anything petty, mean, or dubious in conduct and character. So all of these words, you know, have implications to them which point to a way to live that is harmonious, where we don't abuse or take advantage of others or allow them to abuse and take advantage of us or of others. And as I've said many times before, and some of us have already received the Buddhist precepts, you know, and Shishin Roshi, my teacher, said that he doesn't like the word to receive the precepts. It's not like something that you is handed down from outside of you. It's something that you have to embody as a manifestation of your life. And he says, rather than receive the precepts, he prefers to reveal yourself as the precepts. So how do we do that? So we're going to talk a bit about that today. And as I said, it's not always clear about what's right and what's wrong, because different cultures have different values. Particularly those of you who have traveled around the world, you know that. I've always felt that although it would be something that I don't think that our government would raise the funding for, but I think every teenager at least should travel somewhere outside the country so they can see that the way that we're taught how things are supposed to be, sometimes they aren't. You know, and people function very nicely in other cultures. Maybe in some cases more so than in ours, which is very divided right now. Yeah. So there's no absolute morality. So how can we be true to the precepts then? And how do we use the precepts to go from the shore of delusion to the shore of awakening? Well, that's the question. So I want to share how one of my Dharma sisters, Roshi Sason Saunders, presents the precepts, and it's part of her Sangha's approach to right conduct, how right action. And the first of their 16 Bodhisattva precepts, and the ground for right conduct is a practice of these precepts. And these are the Sila. And the first three precepts are the three treasures, which we generally articulate as the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The Buddha is, of course, in one sense, is the Shakyamuni Buddha, who awakened and then presented his teachings, and the teachings of the Dharma, and then those who gathered around him to share the teachings with the Sangha. But in a more absolute sense, the Buddha represents oneness, unity, or that's also the awakened nature of all beings. And the Dharma represents diversity, or the ocean of wisdom and compassion. And the Sangha represents harmony, which is the interdependence of all creation. So when we chanted this morning the identity of relative and absolute, the absolute is the Buddha, or oneness. It includes everything, and the diversity is the relative, or the Dharma. And the identity, that's the Sangha. That's what holds things together. So that's one way to look at it. And the three precepts are to be one, or to merge with all of these three treasures. And that's what we're merging with. And then there's the what we call the three pure precepts. And the way that they're often translated is to cease doing evil, to do good, and to do good for others. And what Roshi Sason took are the three tenets of the Zen peacemakers, the three pure precepts. And Bernie Glassman, who developed the Zen peacemakers, and these three tenets are the guidelines for practice in the Zen peacemakers, and they correspond to the three pure precepts. And the first one is not knowing, is maintain a mind of not knowing, and therefore giving up fixed ideas about ourselves and others. So if we come into a situation in our life where we already have a fixed idea of what things are going to be, then we're not open to what's actually going on. We're already congealed or rigid. And that's what it means to cease doing evil. It means to let go of any fixed notions that we have. And the second one is bearing witness, which is to doing good, and bearing witness to both the the joy and the suffering in the world. So bearing witness means being present to everything without judging it. So if we can maintain the mind of not knowing and then be present, then we'll just see things as they are. We won't put filters over it, and we won't distort it. We'll just be present with what is. And there's a tremendous amount of power in just being present. You know? Yeah, Yugen Sensei worked for a number of years, with dying patients, and just being present with them is sometimes the best thing that we can do. In the hospice program. And I mentioned this before, but when I was studying at the Zen Center in Los Angeles, there was a very famous psychiatrist who started meditating with us. And he told me after he'd been there for a while that the more he meditates, the less he has to say to his patients and the better they get. So what does that say? That says he just knew how to be present. Quite often when we're present with people who have problems, we want to try and figure out how to fix it. But we can just be present. And that's bearing witness. So if we maintain the mind of not knowing and bearing witness, then the third one, which is do good for others, becomes loving actions towards ourselves and others, or loving actions based on not knowing and bearing witness. And that's where the activity comes in. If we really empty ourselves and if we pay close attention or mindful, then we'll see more clearly what we can do. And sometimes it's just to be present. Don't necessarily have to do anything. So those are the three pure precepts. And then there's the 10 grave, we call the 10 grave precepts. And some people try to map them to the 10 commandments. They don't map perfectly, but there's some overlap there, of course, But, yeah. Well, when we look at our 10 grave precepts, again, they're not rigid. There's the first one is to not kill, and actually the way that Seisan articulates it is, I recognize that I'm not separate from all that is. This is the practice of non-killing. I will not lead a harmful life, nor encourage others to do so. I'll live in harmony with all life and the environment that sustains it. Affirm life. So if you see something as thou shalt not kill, what does it mean? It doesn't really mean a lot when you think about all of the religious wars there have been and all the killing that have been done in the name of the God who supposedly handed down these commandments of not killing. But if you look at it, in order to sustain life, we have to take life. We take life all the time when we eat. Even if we're vegetarians, we're taking life. There's quite a few Buddhists are vegetarians, but not all, obviously. And I don't know if it was just a rationalization, but my teacher was Japanese. He ate meat, and somebody was complaining to him, and he would have maybe some teriyaki steak here and over on this side there might be some sprouts or something like that. And he would say, well, look, well, which looks more alive to you? You know, you look at the sprouts, you know, he said, boy, you know, that looks really alive, you know. But like I say, you need to take life, but we can kill all kinds of things. That's why it says that I'll live in harmony with all life. Not only all life, but we can kill relationships, you know, just by our actions, by being closed off. But, you know, and then of course we can kill time. You know, we chant the Gatha at the end of session in the evening. It says, time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. So we can waste time. Yeah. Now, all of these precepts, there's a way to look at them very fundamentally. Not killing means not killing, period. But that can't, as I mentioned, that can't be in every case. And then there's the bodhisattva approach, which according to conditions, sometimes we have to take life. Yeah. There's one of the Jataka tales, I think, is of when the Buddha, in one of his former lives, was on a boat, and he saw the intention of, there was a man on board who was a unsavory guy, and he was going to kill all of the passenger and crews and commandeer the boat and take all of the cargo. And the Buddha in the former life realized this, and he took the life of the criminal to prevent him from doing that. So he violated this precept. But if you look at what was the overall picture, was it appropriate to the time, the place, the people involved, and the intensity of the situation? So there's even stories like this where it depends on what's appropriate. And then you could give you could probably come up with examples yourself. So the first one is non-killing. And the second one is non-stealing. It says, I'll be satisfied with what I have. That's the precept of non-stealing. I will freely give, ask for, and accept what is needed. Be giving. Well, again, you know, it depends on the situations. And the classic example of this, you know, is a poor person whose children are dying of starvation and steals a loaf of bread to keep them alive. Well, of course, our laws aren't so forgiving, but what about moral and ethical laws? I mean, yeah, in this business that's going on with Trump having to put up a bond of $500 million, you know, which was reduced by a judge. You see examples of people who didn't have $300 to put up, and they got put in jail, you know. So what are we to make of that? If we're talking about ethics and morals and justice and righteousness. So I think that everything is nuanced, you know. I think there was a joke about Tammy Faye Baker, who had one of these televangelist shows, and then he was caught stealing from the congregation and having affairs. And somebody said that instead of the 10 Commandments, they have 8 commandments and 2, do the best you can. Well, that's kind of what our precepts are, or do the best you can, but always be aware. Always be aware of what we're doing. Don't just, do what you need to in order to help yourself, because we have to remember that the 3 treasures are to be one with everyone. So that if you take advantage of somebody else, you're taking advantage of yourself. They're not separate. So we don't do that. We don't injure ourselves usually, unless we have some kind of a mental illness. So we don't injure others. So let me go through the rest of them. The third one says, I'll encounter all creations with respect and dignity. This is a practice of chaste conduct. I will give and accept love and friendship without clinging. Honor the body, do not misuse sexuality. Yeah. So there have been problems of that with teachers in our tradition and other traditions too. So we have to be careful with all of these precepts that we don't think that we're above them. The fourth is, I will speak the truth and deceive no one. This is a practice of non-lying. I will speak from the heart, and I will see and act in accord with what is. I'll manifest truth. Well, of course, truth is also relative. Just depends on how we see things. But it always goes back, to a precaution that in the ceremony of Jukai, where the preceptor says that wisdom is your guide, and don't follow dualistic or misleading ways. So the important word there is dualistic. We don't create a dualism between ourselves and others, or between ourselves and anything. As soon as we create a dualism, then there's a gap, a separation, and then we treat others as something that can be manipulated, exploited, taken advantage of for whatever reasons. If everywhere we look, we see our own face reflected, this doesn't happen. The fifth is, I will cultivate a mind that sees clearly. This is a practice of not being deluded. I will not encourage others to be deluded. I will embrace all experience directly, proceed clearly, do not cloud the mind. Some of you might recognize originally this was don't take intoxicating substances. But as Kazon said, that the worst wine we can drink is the wine of delusion. But still, if we cloud our mind with drugs or alcohol, we don't see clearly. And quite frankly, in a number of religious communities, alcoholism has been a problem. And then the sixth is, I will unconditionally accept what each moment has to offer. This is a practice of not talking about others' errors and faults. I will acknowledge responsibility for everything in my life, see the perfection. Yeah, my Zumi Roshi used to say, you're always responsible. For everything in your life, you're responsible. So why do we talk about others' errors and faults? So we have to look at that. Why would that come up? Yeah. And like I said, everything depends on conditions. Maizumi Roshi was very particular about chanting services and bells and stuff like that. Sometimes he would stop us in the middle of a service and he'd say, "What are you doing?" Was he talking about errors and faults? Well, mostly he'd, want people to pay attention. When you hit a bell, you have to really focus and when you do it so that the bell sings clearly. So if you hit it too soft, it'll ignore you. If you hit it too loud, it'll scream out in pain. So you just have to hit it just right. And the seventh is, I will speak what I perceive to be the truth without guilt or blame. This is a practice of not elevating myself and blaming others. I will give my best effort and accept the results. And realize the self and others as one. See, this all comes back to the idea, the notion of a self-image. As I've talked about many, many times, the Buddha said that there is no self. We just something we create. And we create it in order to give ourselves some importance and independence and autonomy. So one way to give ourselves importance is to elevate ourselves above others and put them down. Yeah, I haven't seen these movies, but I see that there's a franchise now called Mean Girls. I think it's a high school movie about girls being mean to other girls in the high school. And why are they mean? In order to feel good about themselves, if they're above somebody else. Then look at the history of our country. All of the racism, homophobia, sexism, misogyny. See if we could take this seriously. Is there a 10th commandment to love thy neighbor as thyself? Or is that just a teaching of Jesus? I don't know if that's one of the 10 commandments. If it is, we're missing the boat, aren't we? Okay, and the 8th one, I will use all the ingredients of my life. This is a practice of not being stingy. I will not foster a mind of poverty in myself or others. Give generously. And one of this talks about being stingy is to be stingy in sharing your understanding, or don't be stingy with the Dharma. Share what you know with those who are on the path with you. Don't hold back. And the 9th is, I will transform suffering into wisdom. This is the practice of not being angry. I will not harbor resentment, rage, or revenge. I will roll all negative experience into my practice. Actualize harmony. Now, I've always had an issue with this, the translation, because anger is a natural emotion that comes up. It's just how do we deal with it? I think it might be more appropriate to say to not carry hatred rather than anger, because anger we can work with. Sometimes anger fuels us, gives us the energy to do things that can be just and equitable. But hatred, that's creating a separation right there. So what are the factors that bind us to the wheel of samsara? And according to the Buddha, there are three poisons, and they're called greed, hatred, and delusion. And hatred sometimes is translated as anger, and delusion is sometimes translated as ignorance. But anything based on greed, hatred, or delusion leads to suffering. And sometimes other poisons are added to it, like envy or jealousy, pride. But these are the three basic ones. And then the 10th of these precepts is I'll honor my life as an instrument of peacemaking. And this is a practice of not thinking ill of the three treasures. And I will recognize myself and others as manifestation of oneness, diversity, and harmony. Experience the intimacy of things. So if we think ill of the three treasures, and our three treasures are no other than our life. And our life is no other than the life of all life. So then we're just having negative thoughts about our life and the lives of others. And it's easy to do. Somehow when we're conditioned, when we're young, we might be told that you're not going to amount to anything, or you could do something better than this, or, you're lazy or whatever. And then you might have this thought that I'm not good enough. And that thought right there is not in accord with this precept. Not thinking ill of the three treasures. If you think ill of yourself, you need to reflect on that. Where's that coming from? What's that about? So, Sisson said that it's their sincere intentions to continually realign our lives in accord with these precepts. And then the commitment, to work things out. And when we violate these precepts, we expected to make an effort to realign ourselves. Well, one way to think about it is that not that we're a bad person if we violate a precept, but it's like when we eat, our utensils and plates and pots and pans get dirty. So we have to wash them. So we just continually notice what we're doing and then vow to clean up our act, to wash the dishes and do better next time. So it's through such efforts that mutual trust and respect and joy of practice will flourish in the Sangha. So that's kind of a quick tour of the precepts, but let me finish there and open it up for any comments or questions.